I've been doing this for quite a long time. Actually, January will be 20 years. Wow. Yeah. It's been a fun run. We've just working with a lot of cool, interesting people that are, out there working hard and trying to build freedom and wealth. But, there's two types of people really out there. There's the ones that are, kind of in the know, and that's why we're all here. We're learning. And then there's people that even CPAs that just are not in the know. And it's a shame, but I try to educate people. I'm on a lot of different podcasts. I do a lot of pro bono work. I love talking about this type of stuff. I am not a tax guy by training. I kind of fell into this thing as an entrepreneur back in 2006 when my background was more, I was in the energy space for a while. I was actually in the telecom space for a while doing utilities and started this consulting gig. And then cost seg just really landed on my lap. Some CPA, I think, or somebody sent me these rulings in the IRS tax code. I'm like, what is this? Like, what is this? What do you? So I called my CPA after reading about cost seg, and all I said is, "This legal?" And he says, "Yes." I said, "Do you do it?" He said, "No." And what I kept finding out was, as I was kind of doing my due diligence, just am I going to start this company or am I going to go down this road? I started finding out that most CPAs just didn't offer this as a service. I couldn't understand why. And the more I dug in, it's not the CPA's fault. It's really this. There's a lot of legalities behind cost segregation and why it works and how it works, when not to do it. And then there's also there's engineering a piece. So you got tax and depreciation, which CPAs obviously know very well. Then you've got this kind of like you got to understand how these buildings are put together. And then there's all kinds of like legal. There's been over 300 court cases and IRS memorandums on how cost segregation works. So for people that didn't raise their hand about cost segregation is it's kind of a crazy name. It's got, I don't know who named it, but it's weird. Um, it makes no sense, but I guess, segregating out costs and just sounds weird saying it out loud when you talk about segregation. But um, anyways, so it's important to understand like how it all kind of plays into someone's tax planning. So in the tax code, you've got if someone buys a building for, let's say, $1 million, that building is going to depreciate over what we call the straight line method. And that is if you're going to buy an office building or a commercial building, it's 39 years. And then any other residential investment property depreciates over 27 and a half years. So there's another pathway in the tax code. Cost segregation has been around since about the late 60s. People don't really know this. It went away in the tax reform in 1986. And then it came back in the early 90s and nobody really knew about it. Like the IRS is not sending out letters to everyone's household and say, hey, we've got this cool new tax program where it's going to show you how to eliminate all your taxes, right? So nobody really knew it existed except the larger companies. It came back in the tax code, like I said, in the early 90s. And it wasn't until like mid 2000s where the IRS finally published what we call the IRS technique and guidelines. I started the company in 2006. And after really interviewing a bunch of CPAs, I'm like, this is solid. Like this is a cool strategy. Um, I started hosting events in Detroit. I didn't know. Again, I'm not a tax guy. I wasn't a CPA by training. My background was more mechanical engineering, and then I got into the energy space. But always been an entrepreneur. So we launched it. I had about 30 CPAs show up, and we launched the business back in 2006. Doing that, I ended up partnering with a guy that from the old. Remember old? Well, some of the young guys and gals probably won't. Never heard of anybody ever hear of Arthur Anderson? Like one of the original big CPA firms back in the day. Well, they went out of business, and one of the main guys that was in their valuation division of the company, he ended up being a cost seg guy, and I cold called him. I said, "This is Terry from Detroit. You don't know me. I'm starting a cost seg firm." He's got perked up, and at the time it just so happened he was looking for an opportunity, and he was a CPA by training, but he ran the cost seg business for Arthur Anderson back in the day down in Florida. So him and I literally partnered. We didn't actually meet for about 6 months, and I said, "Can you help me fulfill these reports? Because I know building owners, and I'm going to start introducing the business, and I need someone to help me because I have no clue how to put these reports together." And this guy was kind of crazy, and we ended up partnering for about 2 years, and then we ended up I found all kinds of issues about this clown, but anyway, he actually mentored me for the first couple of years. And we parted ways, and that's really so the company really started to take off. But anyway, so getting back to cost segregation is just a fast way to write a big chunk of the building off. It's usually anywhere from 30% up to 90% of a property that we can accelerate the depreciation. And what that does is it creates time value of money. So if you were to buy a building and you knew that the IRS had one pathway in the tax code that they're going to allow you to write this property off over long term, 27 and a half years, let's say, or you can write it off in 1 to 5 years, which makes more sense? Why would you let the IRS hold on to your money for 30 to 40 years when you can put it in your pocket usually within 1 to 5 years? And that's the power of cost segregation. Okay, so it's time value of money. Dollar today is worth way more than a dollar down the road. So what qualifies for cost seg? Well, really, in today's world, any property that has a purchase price of about $350,000 and above. When I first started in the business, it was about $1 million and above. We wouldn't even look at a property if it wasn't leased over $1 million, just for the economics. Now, because there's something called bonus depreciation, which I'll touch on, we're helping people with Airbnbs, midterm rentals, long-term rentals, small storage. I said single family. We're typically doing 3 or 4 more, or 3 or 4 like homes, package them up. But anything over $350,000 and above, and it's an investment type property, it qualifies for cost segregation. Okay. The only time you probably would not want to do a cost seg is if you're going to flip the building or property, you're going to get in and out of it under a year because you're going to pay longer term capital gains. So the whole time to do a cost seg is usually about 3 to 5 years is really where you get your biggest bang for the buck. So that's really the kind of the sweet spot. Any questions so far?
Pretty good. And
Yes.
do you have is there a time frame when you had to do a cost seg from when you buy in, where you can do it?
No, usually the day of closing, we can do the cost seg. That's usually when the very best time to do it is right when you do buy the property. You don't have to. You can go back in time. We can file what's called a 481 adjustment. And what's so cool about that is that we can. So let's say you've owned a property for 5 years, and you're just now hearing about this magical tax strategy, and you're like, "Oh my God, did I screw up? Did I miss out on this window?" The answer is no. We can go back in time. Matter of fact, the IRS lets us go back to 1987 legally. We don't go back that far. The building would be completely exhausted or depreciated already. But we go back 10 years all the time. And they allow us to go back. It's a one-time automatic consent. The IRS says you can go back to the date that you bought the building. We will redo all of the depreciation. You get to carry it forward to the current tax year and then use that against any income going forward. And then whatever you can't use, because the numbers are pretty large when we're cost segging something that's, let's say, $1 million, it's about a $350,000 tax savings. And you're going to use that against rent. And I'll get into all this, and then it has a carry forward for the next 20 years. So whatever you can't use, I like to call it the open checkbook. It's just excess. So every time you have a capital gains issue, or your properties are starting to ramp up and it's now cash flowing, you're taking this depreciation from the cost seg study and you're using it to offset any income that your properties are producing. We all get into real estate to generate income, but it's also a phenomenal tax play. You heard Chris talking about, don't just think about real estate as passive income or cash flow, because a lot of the time it's BS. And I'm glad he calls people out on. I love your post, man, because you just like right in their face. But it is a storage of money. It is a storage of wealth. People that are making money, they're buying real estate based on the tax savings. So I own a company I can't qualify as a real estate professional, which and I'll get into that too because we'll talk about that. And there's only so much that I can take as a write-off. Now, if I let's say I wanna buy a short-term rental like this. How many people own a short-term rental? Anybody in here that has a besides okay, so quite a few guys. Um, the short-term rental game, again, it's you gotta buy it right. I mean, something like this is gonna cash flow like crazy because of the size of this, and you can sleep 22 people, so it's gonna cash flow. He's gonna be able to demand a pretty good, uh, monthly rent. But this thing is going to create probably about $500,000 in tax savings for Chris. He's gonna be able to take that 500 grand and use it, so catch this, you can use this against capital gains or any other W-2 income that he has now that has generated a taxable situation, okay? Does that make sense? So when you're a real estate professional, you're doing real estate as a profession, or your spouse is doing real estate as a profession, or she or he went and go get your real estate license. You can you then as long as you're doing real estate for 750 hours a year, you then can take this real estate professional status, and now you can then use it to offset other income coming in from anything else, even if you're a high net worth W-2 earner. I mean, some of you are probably still in your profession making money, right? How much are you does and Uncle Sam's taking 40% of that money every single year. How much faster could you grow your wealth if all that 40% was back in your pocket and now you're just getting into these projects, one after the other and, based on, knocking down. So every year I gotta look at, okay, here's my income is gonna be X, and if I don't tax plan, I'm gonna get whacked. And there's been a couple of years where you're growing the company and you don't realize, like, you have a shitty CPA. Their CPA's not calling you and being like, "Hey, dude, we got to get together like first quarter, and I need to know like how much money you're going to make, what kind of deals are you doing." Most CPAs are they call you in the fourth quarter and say, "Send me your stuff, and we're just going to follow your tax return." And there's been zero tax plan, so you can get caught up in writing a big check to the IRS if you don't tax plan. That's why it's so important to be in rooms like this, have a CPA that's understands real estate, and work with a good cost segregation firm that can also help you tax plan. Because personally, I've been through a lot of stuff in terms of investing, doing the wrong things, waiting too long to do the things, not exiting a property correctly. So all this stuff is just is very, very important.